Hey guys, my name's Abby and I'm a full-time furniture refinisher. Today I'm going to be showing you how I built this mid-century modern base to transform this ugly 1980s dresser. If you don't have a miter saw, don't worry because this is completely beginner friendly and I'm going to show you a couple of alternatives just in case. The DIY Wife channel here on YouTube builds their own custom wood base and it completely took the furniture flipping industry by storm. So this is basically just a spin-off of that base. If you haven't watched her video, I'll link it below. So let's get to it.
Whenever I start working on a new piece of furniture, the first thing I'm going to do is remove all the hardware and clean it off with Crud Cutter. It's really important to use a good degreaser on furniture before painting it. And be sure to rinse it off. To remove the old base on this dresser, I flipped it onto its back and then unscrewed all of the supports. Some bases require a circular saw to remove, but this time I got lucky. Once the screws were out, all I had to do was hit it with a hammer until it broke apart. The old base was about 5 inches tall, so I decided that I would make my legs 7 inches to give it a little height, considering that it would be about 1 inch inset. I decided to sand off the old finish and paint the dresser before attaching the base, and I came to find out that this was a terrible mistake. While I was dragging the dresser around on the floor, I damaged my paint job and ended up having to do repairs. So I figured I'd go ahead and build the new base before I did my last coat of paint.
Normally I would use red oak, but unfortunately they didn't have the 2x2s that I needed, so I picked up poplar. Poplar, it will be sturdy enough. The only thing is it doesn't take stain very well, so you're going to want to use like a gel stain or just do a paint wash on it. I normally do 2x2s for the legs. Now, what you're going to realize about these is they're actually 1.5 by 1.5. So that's important to know when you're doing your measuring. And then I normally do a 1 inch by 3 inch board, but I got it 1 inch wider, so 1 by 4, because this base is sort of inset right here. And I'm going to lose an inch visually when you're looking at the dresser from the front. I'm going to measure visually about where I want my base to be, and I want it a little bit inset so that it's not all the way to the edge. Because we're doing an angled base, I don't like for the legs to come out past the dresser. So when you're doing your measuring, you need to account for that 1.5 inch on the leg on either side. So however long you want the total front of the base to be, you're going to cut this board 3 inches shorter than you want the total length to be on the front. And the same is going to go for the sides. So I need to measure that distance in between. The bottom of every dresser is going to be a little bit different. And in this case, I was lucky that it has a good platform of support, but you can always just grab some scrap wood and glue it on there so that you have more support to attach your base. I personally prefer to mark my cuts as I go because your saw is going to take off 1/4 inch. And I always forget to account for that. Now, before I head over to my miter saw, I just wanted to mention that you can do this without a miter saw. I know it's a big investment. This miter box, I think, is like 10 bucks at Harbor Freight. It's just going to be very painful. And when I say painful, I mean you're going to be tired and never want to do it again. I made one base with this and never used it again. The miter saw is a great investment. And another option would be to use a circular saw. You can actually make these cuts on a circular saw, but a miter saw is going to make the job a lot easier.
Whenever using any type of saw, it's important to make sure you wear your safety glasses. The last time I built this base, I used a 15-degree angle, but I think on this one, I want to try out 10 degrees. I always drop the blade down to double check that I'm not cutting that 1/4 inch off of my measurement side.
One mistake I made last time I built this base was cutting too fast with the miter saw. This made my cuts not clean, so I had to sand more. Now I flipped my board over and I need to cut the angle on the other side. You want it to look like a trapezoid, not a parallelogram. So I'm actually going to cut the bottom angle off of my feet first. And doing that cut is going to make your legs sit level. Now, while I still have the length of the board, I'm going to go ahead and make the tapered cut on the leg because it's safer. I learned this from the DIY Wife channel. She just marks the spot where she likes the angle to be because the miter saw won't cut that high of an angle. Now that I have those angles cut, I'm going to go ahead and measure my 7 inches. And now this is going to be the opposite with the front side of the base. This one, I actually want them to be a parallelogram. We're going to repeat this process for the other front leg, and then on the 2 back legs, we're going to skip the taper because you can't see it anyways. Once you have the cuts, you want to make sure that they're all perfectly even so that your dresser is level. Now at this point, you can kind of start to see the dresser base come to life. And now I'm going to go ahead and measure the distance I want between the legs on the sides. And we do not want to do the angle on these cuts. Just have a tiny scrap piece left. And I'm just going to use these for extra support. Now to assemble the pieces together, I'm going to use my Craig jig. I just have the little inexpensive one. On your drill bit, it needs to be set to the 3/4 inch. If you're using the same size wood as me, the same thing goes for your pocket jig. If you're using a different size wood, they give you this little tool that measures it and lets you know where you should set your Craig jig. Okay, so obviously you want the holes to be on the inside of the dresser, not facing outwards. So with the Craig jig, you are just going to line it up where you want the holes. And since we have an angle, you don't want to actually drill it at the angle. You can just do it at the longest point and it'll be fine. And then clamp it down so it won't move. God. Oh, no. Now that we have all the joints to connect the legs to the base, we're going to go ahead and drill the holes that are going to attach the base to the dresser. If this is your first time building a base, I would recommend not using wood glue just in case you made any mess ups and might need to like fix your holes or fix your cuts. And even if this isn't your first time, I wouldn't wood glue the whole base to the dresser in case it ever needs to be removed in the future. So I am going to do holes in downwards, probably 2 on each side, just spread apart evenly. As you can see, holes are going down. Now would be the best time for me to sand this piece of wood with 220 grit. Poplar doesn't take stain well, so I'm going to be doing a paint wash on this.
This is going to help me eliminate any green tones that might show through. Next, I sealed everything with this 1-coat polyurethane. I was pretty skeptical, but it actually turned out nice. And now I was ready to assemble the base and attach it to the frame. It's up to you if you want the side pieces to be angled with the legs or flush with the frame. I use 1¼ inch fine thread Craig screws. I then press down on my drill when screwing them in so that I don't strip them. You can use a clamp if you're having a hard time keeping the wood where it needs to be. Once the base is assembled and centered on the dresser, you can screw it in. Now that I have the base attached, I'm going to finish painting. It really was a bad mistake for me to be dragging a freshly painted dresser across the floor. It's definitely easier to just tape off the base once it's already attached. Now, as badly as I wanted to be done here, there ended up being water damage that I didn't see until I painted the dresser. Unfortunately, this was a deal breaker for me, so I decided to march forward by adding some trim. If I can build this base, anybody can, and I really hope that you try it too. Let me know what you think of this transformation in the comments.
Thanks so much for watching, you guys. Please hit the subscribe button if you enjoyed this video, and check out my Instagram because I post furniture flips weekly.